It's 6 o'clock, so we will call the July 9th regular commission meeting to order. And I will ask our clerk if we have a quorum.
Yes, ma'am, we have a quorum.
Okay. I would like to ask Danny Howell if he'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by Commissioner Bridges with our invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let's be seated, please. Last week, we were reminded of how fragile life really is. Eric Davis wanted to be here tonight, and he penned a prayer that I'm going to attempt to read. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, we gather here tonight with hearts that are heavy. We know there's work to be done and business to be conducted, but in the midst of our business, we thank you that we can pause and ponder your greatness and your comforting presence in our time of need. We ask your blessings upon the Gordon family in their time of loss, and we recognize that there are many in our community who seek the peace that far exceeds anything we can offer one another. You have promised you will never forsake or abandon us, yet we admit in our moments of desperation we feel very much alone. Help us to trust your goodness. Help us to lean upon your wisdom and understanding rather than our own. Help us to know that you are here and you will not let us go. Lord, you see and know that we cannot even imagine, and when we face overwhelming challenges, you remind us just to wait and see what beautiful things you have in store. We admit that we are not patient people, but we know that your plan is best even when we don't understand. In your boundless compassion, we seek solace and sanctuary for our souls. Oh God, you call home cherished souls, leaving behind a silence where once their laughter filled our hearts. Yet in the quiet, we find the strength to whisper our thanksgiving for the times we shared, for the love we felt, and for the memories we now cherish. For the families who have experienced the loss of a loved one, we seek the perfect power that sustains us as we experience the beauty of your presence. Remind us, Lord, that you understand our pain and comfort us with the hope offered through your resurrection. Thank you for the eternal home that awaits us, where we once again experience joy that will never end. We are forever grateful for your sacrifice and your promise of eternal salvation as we place our complete trust in you alone. Thank you again for who you are and who we become in your presence. We offer this all prayer in your holy name. Amen.
Amen. Let's have a recognition of elected officials.
Dan Plant, School Board.
Recognition of veterans.
David Cotton, Navy Special Operations.
Johnny Hudson, U.S. Army. I assume you have one of them.
Yeah, I was going to say, y'all two have the bench, right? And now recognition of law enforcement.
Danny Howe, Clayton County Sheriff's Office.
Recognition of county department heads.
Chris Martin, Planning.
Martha Thompson, legal. Carrie Melton, assistant county manager. Tiffany Hampton, health department. Sandra Oregon, range director.
Okay. Okay, commissioners, we have the proposed agenda in front of you. Are there any items that you would like to add or remove from the agenda? And if not, I will entertain a motion to either approve or deny the agenda as presented.
I'll make a motion to adopt the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. And now we have a special presentation. We would like to recognize Luke Bean with the Farm Bureau to present farm safety and low-hanging wires.
So I'm
obviously not Luke Bean. But, my name is Andrew White with ASR Grain Company, one of the owners of ASR, but Luke asked me to kind of speak in his behalf, kind of the concerns we're having with kind of low-hanging lines and just the concerns we have and just the safety part of it. But one of the our biggest challenge is really moving down the road with some of the equipment we have. And not just moving in the road, operating in the field, but a lot of times us as farmers, we kind of adapt, so we get used to the lines in the field. But as moving down the road, lines that continually change, continually sag more, we can't always be looking at those things. But I kind of give you just something that happened to us just not too long ago that we've been working with. Steve, my partner, was driving a sprayer down the road and hooked ended up being a Spectrum line, and the line snapped and pulled the power lines down, and it fell on the truck, our water truck right behind him going down the road, which we had one of our employees that has been with us for years and years and years, and just pretty much a part of our family. And just and that happening is talking about a dear life, but somebody could have lost their life that day. And the biggest thing kind of going forward is and just not that situation, but it's starting to happen more and more. And all our equipment is in regulation as far as height and that kind of concerns goes. But we just basically are coming, kind of looking for support and going forward, figuring out the best options we can, is figuring out a plan to where we can get these lines in a safe height, and figuring out the best ways we can make sure these lines stay where we can be safe in the fields, moving up and down the road, and not just us as farmers, but other people moving down the road. That line that fell was actually just put up the week before, literally just 7 days before, with the Case Farms truck hit it and pulled it down. So that line was literally just repaired the week before that. So it's not like it's been an ongoing problem that is SAG that they didn't know about. They were just fixed it there at the scene. So that's kind of a big thing that kind of really made us want to focus a little more on this problem. But I guess kind of what we're going is some of the problems and really looking for communication, not just when knowing who to contact. One of the biggest problems we have, not knowing whether it's the AT&T, whether it's the Spectrum line, which line. We don't really have trouble with Duke Power lines. It's more just because they're having to lease those lines off of Duke Power, so it's more of those lines that are on the lower plane. But it's kind of figuring out how we can come back as far as communication goes. Is we've discussed maybe having like you got an 811 number, so where you can kind of call to dig. So maybe kind of seeing if there's a number we can call if we approach a low-hanging line, a number that we can call that reports that, documents that, and also reports that line, so we don't have to go through and bother anybody else's time as far as which line it is and those going on. But also just kind of open communication up with people, with the utility companies, between farmers, like I said, between other entities that have concerns with this, so where we can kind of work on solutions where it's not trouble. One of the biggest problems we have is when we have to contact these utility companies. Anybody we talk to, they said they are not allowed to contact to give us the number of the next authority higher that can make a decision. It's always, we can't make this decision and we cannot give you the number. So where are we stuck? We're stuck right where we're at. We have nobody to contact. So that, I think, kind of getting help in figuring out that communication part. We're not out here trying to do anything, but like I said, we also want to, when we have contacted people in the past, we have had, we've not been able to get anything done from it. So figuring out that communication part, like I said, that 811 number is maybe if that could be a solution. I know that necessarily but on a state level as well. But also just kind of starting off, we'll see if we can't get somebody to kind of go through and do a thorough assessment of all lines, where kind of, and figuring out, especially in agricultural areas and areas where equipment is moving down the road where that can be a concern, and see if we can't, I guess, get a true assessment of where we're at. One thing we have been doing, Spectrum has given us a number with a guy to kind of start sending pictures of lines and stuff like that, because we literally can drive 2 or 3 miles and there's multiple lines that are low, that are concerned. And also, one thing that, going forward, another thing is having ongoing monitoring, maintenance of these lines. So one thing we can make sure that the accountability of making sure these lines stay at a certain height that we need, that we can be safe. Like I said, it wasn't just at the line in our situation that it fell, but it was also the power lines that pulled down because they are connected, and it did fall on the truck. That, you know, if it wasn't a trip to breaker, if it wasn't fell off, that we could be looking at a pretty serious situation. But just accountability. But and that's more or less what we're after, and just kind of, like I said, looking for your support. We appreciate all your support that you give us constantly, especially in agriculture and working with you in the past. And we just look for your support and just figuring out the best ways. One thing, we do have a meeting coming up on this coming Monday, July 15th at 8:30 at the Farm Bureau office, and we would love some support from our commissioners. And we do have representation from AT&T, Duke Power, and Spectrum coming to where we can kind of work through some of these problems. And like I said, the communication thing, we're constantly going to work at it, but we would love y'all's support. That's it.
Thanks, Luke. Stay right there in case any commissioners have any questions or comments?
No, just a comment, but, you know, I see it, and you do too, is tree will fall on those lines and seem like it never come out to get it, and you call somebody, and you can't get through, and don't know who to call, so.
Yeah, we're hoping with this meeting that can kind of open up those discussions where we can
Yeah.
kind of get forward. Like I said, they've been struggling on the communication part of who to contact, and they've also said everything we get is not been able to, they're not allowed to give the number to their superior.
Well, I think you did the right first step at having this meeting, because I wasn't aware of this till last week when I started hearing about it. So I picked up the phone and called Craig DeBrew from Duke Power, and he said that they had just now been put in this loop, and they're going to be there at that meeting on the 15th. And I'll attempt to attend as well. But, you know, we can't go in and make rules and regulations, because they're regulated by the state and federal government, and we can't do that. But maybe we could help with communication and see how, but you know that the commissioners support Cleveland County's agriculture community. It's a big part of our economy, and we appreciate all you do, and we're willing to try to help.
Well, thank you.
I've been in construction my entire life, and this is not a new problem to us either. Something that I've never been able to understand, and I don't know how to correct it, but a lot of times, I know there's rules and regulations that everything that crosses the highway has to be more than 13 feet high, but that don't mean going across the driveway is the same thing.
Well, agriculture areas, you're actually supposed to be above 18 foot.
So,
Agriculture, region, that's in the utility, in their handbook, so that's one thing we're kind of, and that's obviously not the case.
And-
Duke Power meets those needs, but the companies leasing those lines,
right.
they are not.
Yeah, but the little lines can pull the poles down with the big, heavy
Yeah.
Yes.
voltage on them.
Right.
One of the things that I've seen, and I think it's true, is whenever somebody's out there working, it don't matter what kind of rules you got, it's your man that's out there on the ground that's doing it. And we all have employees, and we all know that just because you tell them something don't mean it's done. But there's got to be a way to get some communications to where when we do have a problem, that can be corrected.
And that meeting is this coming Monday,
This
right?
coming Monday the 15th.
At what time?
8:30?
8:30.
8:30?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to public comment. Madam Clerk?
The public portion of a Board of Commissioners meeting is an opportunity for persons wishing to appear before the board to do so. Citizen speakers will be acknowledged in the order in which they signed up to speak and will address all comments to the board as a whole and not one individual commissioner. Speakers will address the board from the speaker's podium at the front of the room and will begin the remarks by stating their name and address. Discussions between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. Public comment is not intended to require the board to answer any impromptu questions. Speakers are expected to be civil in their language and presentation and are prohibited from using profanity or making threats of violence or personal attacks against any person. All comments from the speakers shall be issue-oriented and directly related to a subject that the commissioners have oversight and authority. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to address the board. A speaker is not permitted to share, reserve, or relinquish any remaining time allotted to them to another speaker. Any comments where the primary purpose is to promote a business or candidacy shall not be allowed.
And we have one person signed up, and that would be Mr. Marvin Hutchins.
Read all that stuff, that eliminated about everything I was gonna say. I'm Marvin Hutchison, and I live on Putnam Street in Waco. And I came tonight as a representative of the Waco Volunteer Fire Department. I'm the president of their board. And as you're well aware, and Doug mentioned, we've had a tragic loss in our family. And so the members are in a critical incident stress meeting tonight. We've got counselors and stuff coming in for the firemen that responded to the drowning. And of course, there's all kinds of family ties to that. So anyway, just thoughts and prayers are appreciated on that. But the reason we were coming tonight was we wanted to tell the board how much we appreciated your support. We're fixing to construct a satellite fire station for the Waco Volunteer Fire Department on Highway 150 between Waco and the new bypass. And I was talking to Johnny the other day. It's just amazing to me now that we've got into this how big an impact this satellite station will have. It'll not only have an impact on the insurance rating for the people that live around Moss Lake on that side, but we'll be like a mile from the new bypass in the intersection. So if there's a particular call over that way, Waco will be able to respond and either go north or south. And as we're well aware, getting back to the drowning of the little boy, you know, in these critical situations, time is of the essence. So we appreciate your support on the site for our new station, and we hope to come back and give you an update soon that we're continuing to move forward.
Thank you.
That's it.
That's all you got to say.
Like I said, when you told me all the stuff I couldn't do, it eliminated it.
Sorry, Marvin.
Oh, but one thing about the young man's comment earlier about the wires, AT&T is the absolute worst. I've got an AT&T line that somebody ran into 2 years ago, and it took a year and a half. There was just a pole suspended in my pasture. The bottom part of it was gone, and the guy wire's still there. But AT&T just doesn't do anything to maintain their stuff.
Okay. Commissioners, you have been presented with the consent agenda. Is there any discussion?
Just a comment.
Okay.
And it is some of the, on H would be the update of the new rules and regulations of the gun range. So the people who use the gun range and want to can go on the Foothills Shooting website and read the changes so they can be aware of them.
Anybody else? If there's no more discussion, I will entertain a motion to approve or deny the consent agenda as presented.
Make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to the public hearing. Madam Clerk?
After the public hearing has been opened, citizen speakers will be acknowledged in the order in which they signed up to speak and will address all comments to the board as a whole and not one individual commissioner. Speakers will address the board from the speaker's podium at the front of the room and will begin their remarks by stating their name and address. Discussions between speakers and members of the audience will not be allowed. A public hearing is not intended to require the board to answer any impromptu questions. Speakers are expected to be civil in their language and presentation. All comments from the speaker shall be directly related to the subject of the public hearing. Each speaker is allotted 5 minutes to address the board. A speaker is not permitted to share, reserve, or relinquish any remaining time, all allocated to them to another speaker.
At this time, we'll ask our planning director, Chris Martin, to come up and present Planning Case 23-08, a text amendment to Section 1221 and 12124 for private storage buildings.
He's gonna present, then open the public comment, then you get to come and talk. I got you.
Thank you, Commissioner Harden, and good evening, Board. I have for your consideration a few options for a text amendment that relates to the use of private storage buildings on personal property. And when I refer to the word or the phrase private storage building, we're really referring to any number of, or any type of building that could serve a homeowner for like storage for lawnmowers, lawn equipment, all the way to a personal workshop, car shed, and then a larger workshop. And then you also see that I've got a more of an agricultural style building as well. And one thing that I will point out before I get started is the agricultural style buildings that are serving a bona fide farm would be exempt from any ordinance adopted that has any type of development standard or requirement. So our current ordinance, what does it say? It basically only allows storage buildings for personal reasons or personal uses to be allowed on the same lot as a house. And the reason for that, it's a common rule with counties and towns, but the reason is that it really is it's a tool, and it's trying to maintain residential character. It's one of the goals is to help preserve lots for future residential uses. And then it also is a tool to help prevent misuse of buildings in the future. And that may be an example of where a property owner has a building for storage, they sell it to another owner who then uses it for some sort of illegal business. So that's our current ordinance, and again, it only allows storage buildings on lots that already have a house on it. So they're really meant to be an accessory that supports that house or that residential use. This has been a topic of discussion over the past year or two, and this board has given our office, the planning office, direction to evaluate storage buildings and that ordinance and see if there's ways to be a little more flexible and allow them on vacant tracts of land, but still look for ways to maintain residential character and protection of future use of the lots. And we have done that, and really, you know, there's different ways, there's different approaches you can take to achieve that. You can focus on lot size. You can focus on the size of building by allowing certain size buildings on certain size lots. And then you can apply development standards to situations to help preserve areas of a lot for future residences. So there's different ways to achieve that goal. And what I want to do is present to you 3 options. All 3 of these options I think would work and help to achieve those goals of future residential preservation of an area. But the first option was the original draft from staff, and it focused on lot size. And it basically says if you have a large lot, then you can have a storage building on a vacant lot without having to have a house first. There would be a new definition applied that allowed this use on acreage that is 3 acres or more. It would be allowed in the rural ag or the rural residential zoning districts. So those are our rural most districts. It would be allowed with a 50-foot standard setback, and again, the agriculture uses are exempt. And we chose 3-acre minimum lot size because of those rural style zoning districts. One of those districts, rural ag, uses 3 acres as well for its minimum lot size. So the second option is a recommendation by our planning board. And they really took the building size approach. And they, again, recommend that it only be allowed in the rural-style residential districts of rural ag and rural residential. And they took the approach of limiting the building size based on the lot size. So basically, you can have a building that's 1,500 square feet if you have at least 1 acre, 2,500 square feet if you have at least 2 acres, and 4,000 square feet if you have 3 acres or more. They also applied some setback standards of 100 feet to help preserve space on the lot for a future residence. And they also suggested to require septic evaluation for a future residence and have a requirement of no bathrooms in the building as well. And I think the reasoning behind that requirement is to help prevent the building from being misused as a business. So the planning board's recommendation is to, rather than focusing on lot size, is to focus on building size, and then they had some additional standards to limit the use of those buildings to residential only. The third option is really a combination of the first two. It, again, would allow storage buildings to be on vacant tracts of land in the rural residential zoning districts. It has a building size limitation, and it's smaller than the planning board's recommendation. It limits the building size to 750 square feet for 1 acre, 1,250 for 2, and 2,000 for 3. And I think the reasoning behind that option is that when you get up to 3,000 and 4,000 square feet of a building, the thought is that you could be running a risk for a commercial use in the future with that size of building. This third option relieves a couple of the standards that the planning board recommended. It relieves the requirement of the septic system, and it relieves some setback requirements, moving from 100 feet to 50 feet. So it allows more space on the lot to be used. And that are the three options. So tonight, you have a public hearing scheduled, and you've got basically two options. You can approve or deny, and if you approve, you'd want to pick one of those options. And I can answer any questions.
We can't modify either one of these.
You could. You could suggest some modifications to those as well.
And this ordinance is only if you're gonna put a storage building without the house being there first.
That's correct. If you have a house, you can still play by the current rules, which basically says the building has to be in the side or rear, just not sitting in front of the home.
Yeah, just a comment from me, but, in putting a 4,000-foot storage building out there, or putting a small one, the next thing you know, you've got stuff around it, wind up with stuff around it. My thinking is, if we're gonna allow it, why not say, if it's a storage building, that's what it's for. Your equipment or whatever you got's gotta be inside, can't be outside.
Any other comments before we open the public hearing? Okay, we will open the public hearing, and we have Danny Blanton signed up to talk.
Danny Blanton from Patterson Springs. I just come to speak a little bit about, I've got some neighbors. They're inheriting houses when their parents die, and they own a house themselves. Then they own a piece of property over there, but another family member owns the tract between that piece of property and the two houses. Why would he want to build another house to put a building on his land? Folks, y'all was in the same position sometime or another. Their young people is trying to get started, And we're trying to tell them what they can do with their land. I've got a neighbor down there, and matter of fact, my son sold this property about 12, 15 years ago. 2 mobile homes to someone. They have not been a bag of trash hauled off since he sold it 12 years ago. It's all piled up in the front yard. You drive right by it. It looks worse than Cleveland County landfill with no bulldozers. And then we're wanting to tell somebody what size a piece of property they have to have with a building or they have to have a house. Think about that twice. Y'all were young too and just getting started. We're all getting old. If I ain't got it now, I'm not gonna have it later. Y'all are neither. Y'all won't neither. So before you vote to put strings on somebody like that, we need to put some strings on landfills that's in people's yards, because that's what's there. There's no way that I got a building big enough to put everything I got. So some of it's gonna have to park outside. Because I got a 3-car parking spot and I got 4 vehicles. Have I got to call L&L to come and pick up that other vehicle because I don't have I can't put it in the building? So it's not, I'm not dogging nobody. All I want you to think that y'all used to be in the same position. We got young people in this county. And like I say, the farmers is exempt. I farmed all my life. Everybody can't farm. If we did, we'd have too much corn. If everybody was growing corn, we'd have too much. And then the government would be wanting to pay them to not plant. I've got cows. So please, think before you vote on putting size limit and what a person can do with his land. He's paying taxes on it. And I know I'm contradicting myself because of that trash dump I got down below me. And then I'm talking about that. So I know that's, somebody needs to tell them something. That's true. So if we're going to make rules, make some rules on that before you make rules on somebody's land.
And that was the only person signed up, so we will close the public hearing. And if we have questions or discussion by the commissioners.
Well, I think, Mr. Blanton, you may be just a little bit, don't understand exactly what's going on here, because if you have if your land is already adjoined to that, you probably wouldn't have any trouble at all. We're talking about if it's a separate property away from your house. See?
There was a piece of property, there's a piece of property in between that.
Adjacent. No, not touching. Well, then okay.
Two lands is
I
not
stand
touching
corrected.
each other.
Okay.
And he was told that he could not put a building on that land
Right.
because.
And that's the way
First.
and that's the way it is now. That's why we're trying to figure out a way so that he could.
But you're putting the size of the size of a building. Everybody can't afford a 40 by 40 building a young person can't at the beginning.
Well, we're not saying you have to build on that big.
Right.
And also what we're trying to do is keep this property so that it will look residential down the road if somebody wants to build a house in front of it. We don't want the commercial property up on the road where the whole area around it's zoned residential.
Well, that's not the city person wanting to come to the country. They should have stayed in the city if they want to stay in the city.
Okay.
That's another can of worms there.
Okay,
Well,
public hearing is closed, so
Okay,
commissioners, if you have comments,
Okay,
let's make
yes,
your
ma'am.
comments. Anybody?
Well, we've been talking about this for 3 years, and I think we still hadn't come to a real consensus. So,
Well, it's like you said, right now, they cannot use that piece of property to put a building. So the intent was to try to make it work, if you got a piece of property with nothing on it, you can put some type of building on it. I know, I can take you a place that a guy's got a building on it. He's got trash all around it, got solar panels on top of it, and an outhouse behind it, indicating maybe he's living in it. So that's gonna be the key to it. If we're gonna do something, we gotta be able to enforce it. If we can't enforce it, not gonna enforce it, then we need to do nothing.
Ronnie, you got one?
Yeah, after looking over these three options and trying to come to a decision that's fair to everybody, because right now, if you wanted if you had a piece of property and wanted a storage building on it so that you could store stuff until you got your house built, you can't do it. So, after looking at all these options, I feel like the planning board recommendations is the most fair. It don't restrict it to a smaller building like the last draft does, but yet it does put some restrictions on it. And I like the fact that it has to have a 100-foot setback, because if you're gonna keep a piece of property where it looks residential, there's gotta be enough room in the front of that building to build a house. If you put 50-foot setbacks, some of the setbacks in some of the zoning areas is either 30 to 50 feet. So you've gotta have enough room between that and the building, so 100 feet would satisfy that. So I would like to, make a motion that we approve the planning board recommendations.
I have some comments. So if you're going to do the 3 acres, then I'm wondering why we even started a rural residential area. My understanding was the storage building was for areas that weren't in neighborhoods, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but were more where there's a house here, a house there, and then a lot of empty land. So, number one, they have to get rezoned to rural residential to even consider this. Number two, I'm trying to figure out why we're worried about if a person puts a building in the middle of nowhere, if he wants to put a house on it later or not. If he wants to put a house and the building's in the way, then it's up to him to get rid of the building. Why is the government telling people what to do with their land? That's not what we should be doing. I understand we don't want trash, I understand we don't want things around there, but that's what our ordinances are for, and if we can't enforce them, then we need to figure a way we can. So I think we should, we should not limit them to, or make them have 3 acres, because if we're gonna make them have 3 acres, we don't need this division at all, because we've already got rural agriculture that has that. So we do have a motion on the table.
On the planning board recommendations, you don't have to have 3 acres. It's showing options for
Oh, you
1
said
acre, 2
planning,
acres.
you're doing
Yeah.
the planning instead of the staff. Okay, sorry,
Right.
my fault,
Yeah.
Ronnie, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's the one I'm recommending.
Okay, I thought you were doing the 3 acre one.
No, I don't,
Would you repeat that again? You don't have to have the 1 year?
the planning board recommendation says that if you have 1 acre, you can put up to a 1,500 square feet. And I understand, you don't want a 3/4 acre building on on a 1 acre lot. So, and then 2 acres, you can go to 2,500, and 3 acres, you can go to 4,000. That don't mean you gotta do a 4,000, you could do anything up to that. And also the recommendations is saying that the building has to be 100 feet from the road, which gives the person that's building the building, even though they may not agree with it in the beginning, but if they ever decide to build a house, they're gonna be happy somebody made them put it back far enough, they don't have to tear it down to build a house. So I think the planning board has done a lot of really hard head scratching to come up with this recommendation.
Chris, can you come up for a minute? I guess one of the questions I have, I'm looking at since I'm on the right one now that you're talking about, Ronnie. What about this septic evaluation? Why would we be requiring that?
That would identify, the planning board's thought was that that would identify a house site.
But we don't know they want a house on there.
We don't know that they want a house, that's
But
correct.
if it's residential, it's zoned for a house.
But rural residential is supposed to be different, that's right? It's not supposed to be like a residential neighborhood.
I think that would be a good way to describe the character of that
Yeah.
rural style residential. And one thing that I think that we'd be mindful of is that in the rural residential district and the rural ag district is that you'll find lots that have something other than a house. It may have farming equipment or a farming type of structure, or you may have like a rural style business in those districts as well. So I think one thought behind only allowing the storage buildings in the rural style districts was that it may seem compatible because you're already going to see things other than residential uses in those districts.
And I mean, I guess it just seems to me if they're starting out with just a building and they don't know if for sure they're gonna put a house on it and we're not gonna let them have a bathroom, why do they have to have a septic evaluation?
May
I mean,
may I address that, Scary?
Yes, sir.
All right, in developing property in the past, and anybody that's developing property now, before you can develop that property, you have to have the health department to come out. They don't have to do a full-blown septic tank permit. All they do is perk the land to understand, and that perk's not the right terminology anymore. They come out and examine the land and make sure that it will be able to, a septic tank will be able to work on that property correctly. So it's not a really big expense.
Yeah.
But it lets them know that that the only area of this, and I've had this happen on a larger piece of land. I've had to have to pump the septic system away from that house like 2,000 feet to get to ground that will work for a septic system. And that's what the planning board, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
trying to say.
and I understand what you're saying, but again, to me, and this is just me, I don't know that they're ever gonna wanna put a house on it. And if they put their building out there and they don't go do this, then that's on them if they can't put the house. Why are we worried about it? It's their land, it's their business. Even if they put the storage building at the front and they decide they want their house there, it's up to them to tear the storage building down and do it. It's not, in my opinion, it's not our business.
As long as they got the setback, you know.
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
forth.
I agree with that. I could support number 2 if it didn't have the septic evaluation.
Yeah,
And,
I could too.
you know, I would love for us to put this to rest tonight. I don't want to send this back to the planning board for the 15th time. Y'all have really worked hard on this, and I appreciate it.
And I agree, I could support the planning board recommendation if we took the septic tank out.
All right,
You made the comment, well, if they got farm equipment sitting around, whatever, but you said the farmer's exempt from this, they can, so that's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they already enjoy the ability to put a
Yeah,
building
yeah,
on the
yeah.
vacant
That's
tract
what
of
I'm
land,
saying.
as long as that building's supporting that farm use.
I would be open to an amendment to remove the septic evaluation.
I was gonna
Okay.
chime in. All you can do is you can amend, you can modify your motion to say that you adopt it with the exception of requiring the septic evaluation, striking that provision.
That would be simpler than amending it. correct?
Yes.
So that's proper to do now because the motion hasn't even been seconded, so you can restate your motion that way. Then the chair could call for a second on that modified motion.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll make a motion that we adopt the planning board recommendations with with striking the number 2, the septic evaluation supporting a 3-bedroom home.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously, yay.
Thank you, board.
Okay. Okay, now we're on to our regular agenda, and we have our Health Department Director, Ms. Tiffany Henson, to present an opioid settlement update.
Good evening, and thank you all for having me.
Yes.
Okay. So, as mentioned, I'm going to give an opioid settlement strategy overview and update. Just briefly, a little bit of time frame, kind of where we've been on this journey. So y'all signed on to the DOJ opioid settlement MOA a few years ago. After that point, we started gathering data from some of our local providers, behavioral health folks, local resources, and started to really identify some of those initial trends happening in the county. Last year, we held our first public meeting and invited all of our municipalities to present. Last September, I came before you and presented on the then opioid strategies that board had come up with. We've spent some time then working on implementation up until this point. May of '24, we actually hosted our second annual public meeting, inviting all of our municipalities and partners, gathered some data, analyzed current strategies, and then what you're going to hear tonight are some new strategies that they have proposed moving forward. So again, just as a brief overview, all 100 counties have signed on for the MOA, 47 municipalities. Cleveland County is set to get just a little over $13 million throughout the next now about 16 years. After this first initial kind of front-loaded funding comes in, you see it kind of flattens out, and annually we'll get about $320,000 after the first few years. Special requirements for these particular funds are they have to be maintained in a special revenue account. They are subject to some Department of Justice additional finance and compliance audits to be sure that we're spending it like they intended to. Tonight, we're coming before you for a special resolution because that's how the funding is spent. And then each year we do annual impact and financial reports to the Department of Justice so they know how we're spending our funding. Also outlined in the MOA, which y'all have seen me or heard me say this many times, are two options. So they do kind of limit the strategies that we can select. Option A are high impact strategies. These really are focused on life-saving measures. And then option B are our opioid remediation activities. And these are more of those kind of prevention strategies and trying to get ahead of the stream. In order to pick option B, we do have to complete what's called Exhibit C to the MOA, which is the strategic planning process, and you'll hear me mention that here in just a few minutes as well. So last year, when I came before you, these were the 4 strategies that the data mining had given us, our behavioral health providers, the hospitals, our municipalities, our public meetings had kind of derived this 4-pronged approach. So the community navigator, provider education, community education, and Narcan distribution, expansion of addiction treatment, and our workforce development. So impact of these 4 strategies that we have seen over the last 10 months or so are really on the right here. You'll see the results. So our RFQ was released earlier 2024 for our community navigation program. And if you recall, this program was meant to really provide a point of contact for the community to help navigate our very complex behavioral health and mental health providers, resources, connectivity within the county. And so we awarded our RFQ to ICGH, which is a organization that's based out of Hickory. It's called Integrated Care of Greater Hickory, and they really work on all kinds of behavioral health and mental health things throughout our entire region. And so we awarded that in February. They began recruiting for the staff. So there's 2 staff folks that support this model. And we actually hired this person June. And so we're just getting started here. They're working on marketing and promotional materials now. The idea around this is really to help give a set phone number, a set location, to help partners, community members, family members, really anyone navigate this very, very complicated process. Community and naloxone distribution was our second strategy, and we were able to dispense just a little over 1,000 units, which equates to 2,210 doses. So I really feel like people are taking advantage of that, and we're seeing those circulate throughout the community. And hopefully then as we move into next year, with the help of EMS, we'll be able to see some more data on reversals and life-saving measures. Provider education, we were fortunate to partner with AHEC, and we hosted 2 trainings, one on medication-assisted therapy for our local providers and how they might help folks that are experiencing addiction, and then the other on substance use disorders as well, just to give them more insight. So we did 2 trainings. We had 67 total providers that attended those trainings, had very positive feedback. I think also we'll start to see some of the fruits of that labor, hopefully moving into the next couple of years as they use the knowledge that they gain from that and apply it to patients in their settings. And then last but certainly not least, for the 23-24 strategies was our workforce expansion and development. And that was really intended to get more of our existing workforce credentialed or getting more license that maybe they weren't able to get because of financial restrictions and things like that. And so we did have 3 folks utilize that stipend and that incentive and complete additional licensing. So I think overall, very positive impact. So as I mentioned before, we just had our 2nd annual community meeting. We've been gathering data from the past year on the strategies that were approved last year, taking into consideration what we heard from community partners, providers, our meetings with the public. They have developed then 6 proposed strategies for 24-25, some of which you will see are continuations of strategies that we already had from last year. One of those being the Community Care Navigator program, the naloxone distribution, expansion of our evidence-based addiction treatment, so that workforce development piece, and then 3 additional ones. So one is our opioid settlement coordinator, so having a person that actually leads this work. Because as you can imagine, with just all the reporting requirements and some of the pieces and training, this is a lot of things that we want to make sure that we get right, and so having a dedicated person is a very important piece of that. The next one is our collaborative strategic planning process. So right now, we are operating under option A, which are those kind of life-saving options, as I mentioned previously. But if we want to move into those preventative pieces, we have to do this Exhibit C piece of that, and that is the collaborative strategic planning process. And then the last strategy that we heard over and over is really an expansion to our post-overdose response team. And so this is done in a number of different counties through our community paramedicine program. And that's really the intention here, if the proposed strategies and the authorizing resolution is approved tonight, is to essentially work with EMS to expand upon our existing community paramedicine program and our post-overdose response team that they've just gotten started as of recently. And really just make that more coverage and able to connect more with patients, especially in those kind of overnights and weekend hours is ideal. And so this slide really is just a summary of those strategies and the budget request affiliated. So you'll see the community navigation program is funded at the same amount at the $200,000 annually to implement the program, as well as the performance measures. And then we will obviously reassess annually as I come back before you. Our naloxone distribution, we intend on hopefully being able to continue that and have $10,000 allocated to that, as well as performance metrics of units dispensed. Our expansion, we have $15,000 requested, and again, really hope just to increase those licensures that we have as community practitioners. Our opioid settlement coordinator, these numbers are generated from our existing kind of grading and benefits package, so $95,000, and then really the completion of that strategic planning process, as well as implementation of those strategies. Collaborative strategic planning, around $5,000, and that largely funds this coalition of work is completed by about 70 community partners that come together 1 to 2 times a month. And so largely that is meant to incentivize them because we take up their lunch hour. And so in order for them to come and do good work, we want to be sure that we could really feed them and offer that for their volunteer hours and come in and working on this with us. And then last but certainly not least is this strategy around expansion of our post-overdose response team. Again, that figure, the $120,000 requested is based on current grading and overtime and things like that that are being experienced by the community paramedics right now. So total request for the proposed strategies is $445,000 for the 24-25 strategies. And the action requested for the board would be to approve the opioid strategies authorizing resolution for what's been presented or deny. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead.
One question I have is, the people that, like the manager, it's a pretty good chunk, are we gonna be obligated to continue this once these opioid funds are depleted? Or is that gonna be a burden on the county later?
So currently, we actually already have this position at the health department, and this funding will actually help offset that existing salary that we already have. So this is currently being done by our health services coordinator, who was operating under our federal drug-free communities funding, and so that's how she was previously funded, and we've rolled these responsibilities under that, and so by authorizing this, this would allow for us to cover her salary in continuation as it supports this funding.
I guess, Ronnie, ask basically what I was gonna ask. Was it looking at the numbers, or those guaranteed numbers, or those requested numbers? And if you don't get them numbers, what are you gonna do?
So,
Dollar figures.
for these budget requested dollars? Is that what you're, yes.
Any of them, you went through the whole,
So these are really requested dollars, and we have to, for the funding, get an authorizing resolution to spend any of these funds. And so these are largely driven, the personnel ones come from HR and our benefits package, and so those came from existing salaries or grades that we currently had. That's how I derived those. The ones for the community navigator came from the RFQ package that ICGH submitted to us, and saying that that's the dollars that they needed to do that work and continue. As far as the naloxone, that's about how much we've expended providing the community naloxone to date, and so we tried to keep those numbers pretty flat. But I think realistically, y'all can approve whatever you believe is reasonable here, and that we would work within those, because we have to spend as the authorizing resolution tells us. But these would be my recommendations to fulfill these strategies that have been recommended by the coalition.
And all these dollars comes out of the opioid money, not from the county citizens.
Correct.
And how much did you say we were getting a year?
So we currently are front-loaded, pretty heavy. Whoops, I'm going the wrong way on this. And so right now we have around $2 million in our accounts. But after 26, you'll see we go down to about 320,000. And so I think that's also important to recognize right now when we're working on strategies, trying to figure out what actually are impactful strategies. Because here in the next couple years, our funding is going to go down, and we want to make sure that we're below that 300,000 threshold.
Do we have to use the money they're giving us every year now, or can we carry some of that over to help us when the numbers go low?
Yeah, we do not lose the funding. So if we're not spending it, it sits in the special revenue fund, and there's no kind of deadline that we would have to spend it. No.
Gotcha. Any more questions, commissioners? So I think we're.
Well, as you said, we're going to reevaluate yearly, so it would probably be prudent to go ahead and give you what you're asking for this year, and then we will evaluate it, and if we're successful in what we're doing, then we would certainly probably want to continue it.
Right, yeah, I'll be back before you again next July to present on impacts from these current strategies, and then any recommendations that you may have or modifications that you think we need to adjust. I think we can, again, like Commissioner Bridges mentioned, we can make adjustments then as well.
we don't have to approve it tonight because this is the first time we saw it. I think we need a little more information, and the county manager needs to study it and make a recommendation before we do any approving.
I think that is completely at the discretion of the board.
The numbers are.
The numbers are there, but it's the first time I saw them.
You can certainly defer action to the next meeting.
You're not under a time limit to get this done before.
No, actually, you guys have approved an authorizing resolution last year that actually is effective through the end of August. So I think we definitely have some wiggle room.
Okay.
I make a motion, we defer it to the next meeting to give David time to research it and give us his recommendation on it, because like I say, that's the first time I saw these numbers.
Sure.
Do we have a second? So,
If you don't have a second,
motion
it dies.
dies, okay.
I would like to make a motion that we approve your request tonight.
I'll second it. We have the money, and we know you've done the study, and you've been working on this for a year, and it's already, I think David's already seen all these numbers, so I'll second that.
So,
And, yeah, and I just want to thank you for all the hard work, because I know we have a major problem with that here, and just thank you for what all you're doing. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Tiffany. And now we have Mr. Blake Myers to come up and talk to us about the Broad River Greenway.
Appreciate you guys having me again this afternoon. Want to do a brief conversation about the Broad River Greenway project that we've got going on. Back in 2022, the county received grant funding for a trail rehabilitation project. Right now, that is $100,000 that is grant funded with a $25,000 required match by the county. So our recommendation at these trails is looking at rehabilitating approximately 2.5 miles worth of trails. And the overall idea behind this project is to make these trails a little bit wider. Right now, they're currently 3 to 4 foot wide. We're looking at making these trails roughly 8 foot wide, as well as addressing some of the heavy erosion ruts that are in there. Biggest case in point would be for emergency vehicles or first responders to get into that back section of the trail if something was to happen to where they need to get to somebody. We've been looking at the trails. We've been outlining some high priority areas and looking at what we can do. So right now we have solicited an RFQ. We have reached out to Hoke Construction. They've taken a look at the trails. They're in the process of trying to get some numbers put together for us for what we can do within that budget. So right now, our action would be to award the $125,000 contract to Hoke Construction. Obviously, I would come back and present you guys with an overall assessment of the entire project and what trails we plan to rehabilitate and to what extent goes into that scope of work.
Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I do. You widen the trails to 8 foot, right?
Yes, sir, that is the plan.
And I've made the same request at Kings Mountain with theirs. But why can't you have a specific day of the month where some senior citizens that can't walk the trail can come in with a golf cart or something and use the trail? Because if you widen it to 8 foot and fixing it, you should be able to. And like I say, it wouldn't be open to it all the time, but it would be a specific day. Because a lot of senior citizens would love to get out there and enjoy the outdoors that can't get out there and walk. Is that have you ever considered that?
I think that's a great idea. I think that it would have to be considered by the, obviously through the county to make sure that that's something that would be available. To the extent of which trails could potentially facilitate that, I would need to do some further inspection on there because there is some areas that is relatively steep. So obviously if that was considered and those changes were made, then obviously some additional signage and markings to indicate exactly where they would be allowed to go, as far as what would be safe for them to travel would need to take place as well.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, then we need a motion to either approve or deny.
I like the idea of being wide enough for emergency vehicles, so I'd like to make the motion that we approve.
And I think with it being 3 or 4 feet, if you get people going both ways, sometimes you have a hard time,
Yes, sir.
especially if you got kids with you. So I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, Commissioners, does any of you have anything to report?
I don't have anything to report, but one of the things that was brought up tonight, and I know all of us are aware that it's been happening for a long time. I think maybe we need to start looking at a way to enforce or a way to have ordinances so that people do have to clean up around their homes every once in a while. So, and I know that's a real sticky situation, but I think that's something we need to work on in the future.
When that becomes a health hazard, is that something the health department can be involved in? Or I mean, I don't know. I know y'all have enough to do, but it seems like that would be a health hazard that we could look into.
Anyone else? Okay, the next meeting of the Cleveland County Board of Commissioners will be held on Tuesday, August the 6th at 6 PM in the Commissioners' Chambers. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion.